My name's Rex Wong, and I'm a CEO and co-founder of Aivon. Aivon stands for Artificial Intelligent Video Open Network. And we're addressing the online video space, and online video right now is about 79% of all internet traffic and growing. So it's becoming a major part of the internet. And we're addressing a big marketplace. Right now, video as of this year was about a $732 billion market, growing to 800 plus billion in the next 5 years. So to give you a background, we actually have an existing business called iVideoSmart, which is the largest online video platform in Asia. We were founded in 2016 in Singapore. Our investors include the co-founder of Facebook and the co-founder of Match. And so that's basically our current business. And our current business supplies video platforms for about 1 in 4 TV stations in Asia. So for example, if you think about BBC.com here, over there would be like TTV.com, which would be Taiwan Television, or TV5, which is in the Philippines. In that business, we've raised about 4 million to date. And as Michael helped introduce, my background comes from founding the company that created AdSense, which still represents about 70% of Google's revenue today. And unfortunately, that blew out, but that's a world map. That actually is kind of our footprint. So as you can imagine, that would be Asia. That's Europe, and that's the US. And in Asia, we have platforms in about 14 countries and about 20 countries globally. And currently, we reach about 500 million users, and that's growing to about 1 billion over this next 9 months as we add. One of the key platforms that we're adding is actually VLC, which is the largest open source player currently, which has about 500 million users. And so what you'll see in there will be something called VLC TV, which is think of it as a 100-channel live TV portal. And really, one of the special sauces that we have is that we use AI to do a lot of different things. Specifically, we look into video and actually scan inside video for 7 different components: face, image, text, audio, motion, object, and scene. And so what that allows us to do is to get very accurate metadata on a frame basis. So right now, if you look at metadata, let's say on YouTube, when you search or if it recommends a video to you, it's based on metadata, but that metadata is usually supplied by a user. And that user could be malicious because he wants you to see it, so he could put anything he wants, and that could trick you into watching it, right? So right now, the metadata is not very transparent, and we look to change that using AI, and we've been doing this for the last 3 years to create and use AI to scan. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, for example, this. So this is a video of a big show called Big Bang Theory. And because we've already scanned this using our AI, we know where different actors show up at different time codes. So for example, Kaylee Kaykow shows up in 1 minute and 8, at 2 minutes and 1. And as you can see, we're tracking it on a per second basis. We also find other things: laptop, bed. We can tell that that's a bedroom scene, right? So we have very accurate metadata for video on a frame basis. And so what does that allow us to do? It allows us to do, for example, innovative things like advertising. So this is our digital product placement advertising, where we can basically insert things because advertisers say, well, I want a space where, for example, I could put Starbucks, right? And so that they can search through the video because we know all the scenes that are, for example, in a coffee shop, right? And so that we can very accurately put in content. So we've been doing this for a lot of film companies, TV companies in Asia and the US. And so, for example, we could change products, right? So this is one of the use cases of AI. So don't believe what you see anymore, right? And for example, if Unilever wants to put Dove in a shower scene, we can find that shower scene, and we can place that in there. If Samsung wants to advertise and a movie shot it with an iPhone, we can actually change it, right? So these are actually real examples that we've done with different TV stations. We could look at cars that were not there before. And we could change products for different markets.
How realistic is that? You know, the packaging and everything.
So it's pretty realistic, right? So the second thing we do is we use triggers. So like Messi can trigger a Messi ad because we knew he was appearing on the screen at that exact moment. Or travel to Australia because that was a scene from Australia. Or a car ad could come up because we know that that was the exact spot that the car came up. A third thing we can do is we can look at all the things inside the scene and say, well, that's a product, and compare that to an e-commerce database so that you can actually click to buy, right? So these are some of the use cases of AI. And so that's what we already do. So why do we need a token? Well, we need a token because to do that, we need to scan millions of videos, millions of seconds of videos. And that takes computer resources. In fact, those are the same computer resources that we use for blockchain mining, right? So it's CPU or GPU. There's also ASICs coming out that can do that, right? And we pay better than blockchain for certain instances. So that's really where the mining component of it is. And because we already have access to 500 million users, we can now give them the option to, rather than watch ads to watch video or pay, they now can earn. And so this is where we can deploy our token and incentivize our user base to actually participate in helping us categorize and video on the internet and with our media company partners. But AI is also not totally accurate. It's about 80% accurate right now. So we also need humans. So that's the second component, right? So we need humans to participate to help us in different types of things. And so what do they do? Well, to do this, we are building the Aivon protocol and a token so that we can build decentralized video applications on top of it, right? And we're one of the first to use Plasma. Plasma is Vitalik's new off-chain stateless off-chain type of technology because we don't need to do everything on the public chain, right? We need to do transactions on the public chain, but we can keep data on an off-chain. And so we're actually getting a lot of good publicity from actually being one of the first companies to use Plasma. And that creates a protocol which then you can build decentralized applications. And so what are some of the applications? Well, the first one is that we need to figure out how do we find content, right? On YouTube today, 1 million videos are uploaded a day, right? So more and more, how do you find content through this sea of content that's going out there? And how do you trust what you're actually searching for because users upload, and based on what they tag, it could be different. So like in this video as an example, the question is, what do you see? So user 1 might see that that's a dog and he's white and that looks like a dog show. But user 2 actually knows that that's the Westminster Dog Show. It was this year's dog show. He even knows the name of the dog, right? And so if this video was uploaded with this metadata and somebody searched, let's say, Westminster Dog Show, they wouldn't find it, right? And so this is why metadata is very important. So how do we solve that? Well, we use AI. And with AI, for example, in this scene with George Clooney, and he was just in the news, we can see, for example, that it's a face, that he's happy, that he's a celebrity, that he's George Clooney. We can also see that he's wearing a tuxedo and a bow tie, that the event that he's at is a red carpet, and then there's even a logo in the back, and it's British Airways. And this is basically what we can see in the scene for each second of video, right? So imagine if you had all that data for video, and you had that for every second of a video. So 60 seconds in a minute. So basically, you would have 3,600 sets of data for an hour of video, right? And so that means that you could search for video, for example, I want to find my favorite actor who said this line, right? And go right to that scene. As a different example, we're doing this with the NBA, where basically we're piloting where we're picking up, for example, all the slam dunks in the game. And what does that help them do? Well, before, somebody who had to create a highlight reel of slam dunks in the game would have to go and scrub through the video, find it and cut it and put it on. And now that we've tagged that in real time, right during or after the game, they can actually come up with a highlight reel of slam dunks in the game. And they would pay for doing that, right? Because that would not only eliminate the human that would be needed to do that, that would get that clip out to the audience faster. So what's our problem? Well, our problem is that as computer resources or as videos grow, it needs more computer resources, right? And we're actually competing with mining and other things for these resources, right? And so how do we want to address that? Well, we have a big user base, right? So why not incentivize them to participate? And we don't need powerful computers, because if we have 100 million computers, that can still do a lot of work, right? And so that's where we have our token to incentivize them. And so essentially that video, we can break up into pieces. They have a client that they download. It breaks down the metadata, right? But we also need to validate it, so we have a network of experts that also look and validate that. And essentially, they are incentivized and paid using the token. And so the requesters of that would be content owners, platforms and publishers like, let's say, a Netflix, or advertisers who might want to have placement in that advertising with some of the interesting advertising that we have, or brand safety, because they want to make sure that their content is safe. And so there are at least 15 decentralized applications that we've come up with that can work off this protocol. And we would encourage other companies, these are media companies and content owners, to also create new applications for video to make it more accessible. And one of the first ones that we will do is basically a video search engine. And if you think about it, there is no video search engine today, right? So the first thing that we will build is an open source video search engine, right? And that will allow users to find video better. And today, if you think about, well, if I'm looking for video, where do you go? You probably go to YouTube, right? But YouTube isn't based on any data that is objective, right? It's actually the user who uploads it actually uploads it. Uploads the data, uploads the data. So can you really trust what you're actually searching? And so there's a transparency issue. And this is what we're trying to solve with a more decentralized system. Other things that help are like recommendation and personalization, because we know that when she watches a certain part of the video, well, she likes these type of scenes, not just this type of video. And we can recommend content to her versus to him. And brand safety. So one of the biggest problems in the industry right now, last year, there were a lot of advertisers that were complaining to YouTube and boycotted YouTube because their ads were showing up against terrorist videos, right? A second problem is, if you look at this video, obviously you and I can tell that's not Mickey Mouse, but 2 million kids couldn't tell, and 2 million kids watched that video because whoever uploaded it tagged it as Mickey Mouse, and that was the only way YouTube could tell what the video was. And in essence, 2 million kids saw it before it got caught. And we would be able to catch that right from the inception, because no matter what the user uploaded, the AI could tell, well, that's not real, right? And this is a very negative scene, so there's also contextual and semantic connotations. So YouTube in the last year has started to address this also with AI, and they've hired 10,000 humans to perfect it. So the AI for them in the last quarter of 2017 caught 80.7% of brand unsafe video or content unsafe video. But they needed to use 10,000 humans to scan the other 20% or so. So they're at 99.7%. But they're Google, and they have a lot of money, right? But video is going to be everywhere, right? So what does everybody else do to solve this problem? And that's where we come in, right? Because everybody else can't have the resources of Google to build a big AI system and to hire 10,000 people, right? So that's really where we come in with our decentralized crowdsourced network, right? And we can provide those resources for pretty much every media company that doesn't have that resource, and every content owner that doesn't have that resource. And with that, when we categorize video, we'll also be looking at and ranking all the video for brand safety, including does it have nudity or profanity or violence, et cetera. So think of it like a MPAA rating for the internet. The other things that we address are, for example, videos going global, and translation and localization are a big issue. We're in 20 plus countries, right? So we're using the AI also to do machine transcription and translation, but we're using users to perfect it. And right now, machine translation is at an 80% accuracy, and you say, well, that's not bad, but that means 1 out of 5 words is wrong, right? And that's not good, right? So really, to improve that, we need humans. So that's why humans are also a big factor in this, and they will continually train, and the machine will continually learn, right? And so that's why we need both components. And so in that example, videos would be run through these resources, and humans would verify to transcribe it, and then we would run it again for translation. And to give you an idea, just this market for machine translation is a $5 billion business today. And of course, advertising. You saw, people hate pre-roll ads, right? And this is what we're trying to solve. So you saw some of the advertising that we did that goes to address that. So advertisers will pay to have these types of special types of advertising, and we work right now with every major agency, including WPP, Dentsu, Omnicom, et cetera, as well as advertisers like Unilever and P&G.
Will they be rewarded in tokens post-ACO?
So they would be able to be the requester, and they would be able to buy services using the token. And if they're not comfortable with token, then there's also a fiat token. Obviously, they would get a discount if they use the token. Things like digital advertising, digital placement would be one type of advertising, and video to commerce. And in the video to commerce, the commercial guys would basically pay more like a cost per click, but using token to create a campaign. And so in our ecosystem, there are basically 4 main actors. There are content producers, there are platforms, there are advertisers and sponsors, and then there are users. And some of these guys would be coming in to request services, and some of these would be the workers to create and do the jobs. And they basically would be paid in the token. And essentially, how we do it is that the requester would request and they would basically take the software, and you would have a client, like let's say if you're in AI mining, and you would basically compute, right? And you would stake to be able to compute that, right? And then it would come back, and then we would use a consensus to validate that that was correct data, right? Because you could gamify the system, right? And then we would send it to the human network, which would be a binary network, so there's 2 humans, right? And again, we would use the consensus to not only rate those guys in the future, so they'll earn more as they get a better credibility score, but it will also validate the data. And so in our tokenomics, we already have 500 million users that we can instantly deploy to. We have content producers that we have 165 content producers we work with right now, including major names, major studios, and we have publishers and real platforms. We have about 50 platforms across the world right now. And we have advertisers. We have agencies, and we have brands that are already in the system. So our development schedule, we actually will be at MVP upon the public sale, and basically, so we will have real product, and our regular product has already been shipping, and basically our MVP is basically this token marketplace to create kind of the AI mining and mechanical Turk network. So basically, our public sale date target will be October 1st, and the token price is 16 cents. We have a soft cap of 5 million and a hard cap of 36 million. And we're almost already to our soft cap. We only started a few weeks ago. Actually, this was an older slide. 600 million issues. So initially at the token sale, we'll have 600 million tokens, and over the next 10 years, we will have a graduated system that will release another 400 million for the mining. So think of that like Ethereum or Bitcoin, where basically there will be a release of tokens over the next 10 years, and it will be at a heavier reward schedule so that we can entice early adopters and early miners, early users to adopt, and it will decline at a 25% schedule. And roughly 50% will be offered in the token sale. And this is the initial first year token distribution. After 10 years, actually 40% will have been given to the mining. And our use of proceeds are spread out between R&D, marketing, and operations. This is kind of the reward schedule for the 400 remaining tokens that will come out through the mining. Actually, we have this at October 1st. So management team, like I said, my background came from creating AdSense. I also created the first online video company. In fact, we were part of the team that built the BBC iPlayer here, since we're in London, right? I have a bunch of great guys like Vincent, who ran the APAC division of Dailymotion, which was the #2 video platform behind YouTube, and Adrian, who was the first head of digital for Lionsgate, and our lead blockchain developer developed 10x. And our key advisors and investors. So our investors include Eduardo Saverin, which is the co-founder of Facebook, and Peng, who's a VC now, but he founded several companies, including Match.com. And Michael is one of our advisors here. And then, for example, John Baptiste, he's the president of VLC, which is the most used video player in the world right now, which has about 500 million users. It's an open source player. And Niraj, who's runs the largest digital media company in India, and Jay, who's the vice chairman of Deloitte. That's it. Thank you.
So we have time for one or two questions before we go to the break. Edith.
Thank you very much. That was a very tight presentation, and what you're doing is very visually appealing, which makes sense because you're dealing with visuals.
Yes.
And I like the way that you're tying in the token economics and basically taking advantage of the fact that people who have GPUs want to use them to earn tokens. You're just going to give them the tokens because you need GPUs. So it's a nice, tight story. It's basically predicated on two things, I think. One is that your technology is going to beat all of the other AI competitors out there. And in particular, big guys have no idea if that's going to happen. But, you know, the other thing, which I'm much more interested in, is that it's predicated on the idea that because you're going to be paying these guys the tokens have to have value.
Yes.
You're currently selling at what appears to me to be something like an implied valuation of around 70 million in the initial sale. And so the number one question I want to know is, how do you make that? What are you doing to take those visuals, to take this exciting story, and make sure that there's a very, very large and hungry public out there that are going to be looking to snap up these tokens and raise their valuation?
Yeah. So part of the component was how to work with a token that obviously would satisfy investors, but also have a stable token. So we actually have a gas component of our token, and that gas component will be tied. Think of it in our video platform as a point system, a reward system, right? And the users don't necessarily need to even get involved with token because they can exchange in the system, and they can change it for digital goods because we control a lot of digital goods, right? So for example, on any video platform right now, you'd have to watch ads or you'd have to pay. Well, we'd introduce a third option, right? And that third option would be to earn, right? So if you don't want to give your data away and you don't want to pay for it, and 98% of people don't want to pay, right? Then you can earn, right? And we have a user base that is already at 500 million users, and we're going to grow that to 1 billion with our VLC launch. And VLC will be a plugin within that system, right? And basically that will be the private non-data version of how to do it. And it can be as simple as download and load a client and basically let it run, right? And even if you're not there, it'll just run and you'll earn. And we don't necessarily need high-powered GPU, CPU systems because we've distributed all that data. So if the power of that computer is only so much, then we'll just break it up and basically send it to them. And so we've built a dispatching system that will dispatch that distributed data across the system. Does that answer?
No, sorry. So I think it was an excellent answer, but to a slightly different question. So the question that I'm asking, so I think that makes sense.
Yep.
The question I'm asking is, for that to work, you do want to drive the valuation of your token,
Yes.
and you do want to have a very large audience. And basically what I'm asking is, especially in this sort of, to a degree, post-ICO world, right? Post-public sale world,
Yes.
how are you going to drive adoption? What is your strategy around getting the general public interested in this token?
Yeah, so obviously for the users, it has to be value, right? And for the people who actually are the buyers, quote unquote, they have to have value too. So I'll give you an example. Translation. Translation currently is an existing market, right? We struggle with it every day because we have content from around the world. Like we're bringing, for example, we're bringing Bloomberg content to China, right? Well, but it's in English, and so how do the Chinese people understand, right? And the current market for that exists. There's many companies that do it, but it's $10 a minute, right? That's not cheap, right? Because we have platforms in both developed countries as well as emerging countries, right? The value of that changes. So in essence, there's also an outsource opportunity in there, right? Because somebody can do it for less, right? And so we think just from those core economics, and that was just one category, that will create demand because people who need translation will say, well, it's cheaper to do it here, right? And I'm glad to buy a token because it's like a discount coupon, right? And the user says, wow, I'm getting paid more than I was getting paid, or I'm trying to earn digital goods, so I'll participate in that system too. And it can be very seamless, right? And that essentially creates what we think are the tokenomics. And we have a lot of users, and we actually have a lot of partners already that basically can participate in that.
So these partners that we have, the corporate guys, those are the most difficult to drive adoption in crypto.
Yes.
Those guys are used to fiat, and
Yes.
doing that, as practice shows in ICO world, is close to impossible. So
Yeah.
how would you drive that adoption and coming back to that question, have the implement the loyalty factor for the users post ICO, not necessarily the corporate guys, but the retail, those who pay for translation, for them to keep the token and have so-called long-term value.
So I agree with you. Token adoption is difficult, and so therefore we ourselves on this protocol would have a decentralized app that would take care of all the people that would want to do fiat to token. They don't need to know that there's a token. It's fiat to token. Now they wouldn't get the discount that the token would offer, and so that would be their incentive to adopt the token. And for them, they don't have to look at it as token. It's credit, right? It's credit in the system to be able to utilize and buy services at a cheaper rate. Like buying minutes or buying access.
Why are you discounting the token? That seems to undermine everything. Why is the token allowing you to buy the services at a discount?
So the token, well, that's actually the incentive to get adoption for the token, right? Because we can drive the adoption. So in the early periods, we would discount it because we want to drive adoption, right? Over time, that will probably regress to kind of the mean, right? But it will take time. So really, to drive adoption of the token, that's why there's a discount, and that obviously over time will disappear, right? But that's how you drive the tokenomics, right? Because you need people to adopt, right? And people have to, they have to come in and they have to have incentive to come in.
Are you going to convert all the fiat payments from your existing customers into token purchases?
Yes. So one of the other things that why we need the token is that we're in 20 countries. So one of the problems we have is just intermediary FX, right? Foreign exchange, right? Because I have platforms in the Philippines, I got platforms here in Europe, and we already have a problem, right, in trying to convert that, right? And so the token is what we're going to use as an intermediary kind of exchange, and we own the toll gates, right? We own the toll gates coming in and the toll gates going out. All the platforms that we control, even though they're labeled for other media companies, we control the whole payment stack and the whole tech stack, right? So we can introduce new payment and new options to use. And so we can make token adoption easy because we hit a button and it rolls out across all our platforms, right? And our partners are in for that because it just gives another way to get paid, right? So they're all happy with that.
Thank you, Rex. We're going to a break now.
Okay.
Last question.
Oh, one last question.
Yeah.
Comes out of your break.
I already in gaming industry with this structure.
Yeah, so we actually do e-gaming. Like right now we do ESL, and we're working with a large video game company, I can't say yet who, but they're basically launching an e-gaming network, top 3 gaming company, right? So e-gaming is also a big piece of that, right? And e-gaming, obviously, there's things like, well, if you actually listen to these gamers talk and trash talk, there's a lot of profanity going on, right? And obviously, for parents, they also are concerned maybe it's a violent game and they don't want their kids to see. So there's many angles parents would pay maybe to filter that, right? But the e-gamers themselves, they would pay because in the search, they would want to get discovered, right? And in fact, the search, one of the mechanisms of search will be that you can pay for placements. And that's what I did with AdSense, right, which is pay for placements. Well, in the video world, if you have a search engine, you also will want content to bubble up. And so that will be other mechanisms, right? And for gamers, like influencers, they would probably get donations or things like that. So like, I give you an example in China, one of the biggest things right now is what I call UGC live streaming. Mm-hmm. And there's a company called YY, which
Yes.
actually started as a game chat company. And essentially, you have millions of people that go on, and most of them are singing karaoke, and usually they're pretty girls, right? And then you have guys who basically give them virtual gifts, virtual roses, right? And that's $1 billion company that's listed on NASDAQ, right? And so those are other token opportunities because it's in the payment system. So payments can also be what in that category I call it donations, but it could be gifting or donations.
I can see it as a bonuses,
Yes.
and for the gaming industry itself,
Mhm.
bonuses on the structure of the game
Correct. Yeah. So
to
there are a
reach
lot-
certain levels as well.
Sure. So there are a lot of applications that we haven't even thought of, right? So that's why we built a protocol, right?
Really interesting.
Right. And
Structure.
and we hope that the community will come up with new applications. E-gaming could be one of them, or we'll come up with them, right? To utilize this protocol, and that's really where we think we'll get scale because people will think of new ways to use the token, but it's
Yes.
everything that's corely surrounded around video and content.
I wouldn't call it as discounts, as a bonus. It sounds more professional.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.